Hey, yeah. Another Friday, another Joe Lum's movie review. This is Joe Lum. What I did last week was cover the first Death Wish movie. So this week, I'm covering Death Wish 2, which would be released in 1982. When you're done watching this video, you can go back and check out past episodes on my movie review playlist. It's in the description box. And now, on with the video. Death Wish 2 is a 1982 American vigilante action thriller, directed and co-edited by Michael Winner, who directed the first film. It is the first of four sequels to the 1974 film Death Wish. It is the second installment in the Death Wish film series. In the story, architect Paul Kersey, played by Charles Bronson, moves to Los Angeles with his daughter, played by Robin Sherwood. After his daughter is murdered at the hands of several gang members, Kersey once again chooses to become a vigilante. Unlike the original, in which he hunts down every criminal he encounters, Kersey only pursues his family's attackers. The sequel makes a complete breakaway from the Brian Garfield novels Death Wish and Death Sentence. Redefining the Paul Kersey character, it was succeeded by Death Wish 3. The sequel was produced by Cannon Films, which had purchased the rights to the Death Wish concept from Dino De Laurentiis. Cannon executive Menahem Golan planned to direct the film, but Michael Winner returned on Bronson's insistence. When it came time to developing the movie, it is said that Brian Garfield, who authored the original Death Wish novel, was so unhappy with the film version that he wrote his own sequel called Death Sentence. They'd made a hero out of him, he said. I thought I'd shown that he'd become a very sick man. The idea to produce a sequel to Death Wish originated with producers Menahem Golan and Yoram Globus, owners of Cannon Films. They reportedly announced their plans to do so prior to actually securing the rights to the franchise. But Dino De Laurentiis, the co-producer of the original film, threatened them with a lawsuit unless they properly purchased the rights. He negotiated payments for himself, co-producers Hal Linders and Bobby Roberts, and original author Brian Garfield. The agreement included future payments for each prospective sequel. In 1980, Cannon briefly hired Garfield to write an adaptation of a sequel, Death Wish, which is Death Sentence. However, Golan and Globus did not want to use Garfield's book, preferring an original story by David Engelbach, Golan, and Hal Landers. After they purchased the rights to the first film from De Laurentiis, they purchased the rights to the characters of the novel from Garfield, meaning they could make a sequel without adapting the original novels. According to Golan, he says, "We think our movie is a better film story. You cannot call a film exploitative just because it touches on disturbing issues," said Globus. Both Death Wish films are a valid comment on American society. The theme of street violence getting out of control is sadly more of a fact of life than it was 7 years ago. Garfield later approved a separate adaptation without the character Paul Kersey, directed by James Wan in 2007. That's when they released Death Sentence, starring Kevin Bacon. David Engelbach was then asked to write the screenplay after he saw the final product. He was somewhat appalled how the film differed from his original script. His script didn't include any rape scenes, but those were included by Michael Winner to get his rocks off, quote-unquote. Engelbach argued that serious issues, namely the deteriorating state of our criminal justice system, the actions of the Bronson character are dictated by the inability of the police to prevent crime, the preoccupation of the courts with technical rather than real justice, and the cancerous climate of fear in which we find ourselves today. Paul Kersey is no hero. In his pursuit of vengeance, he loses the only emotional relationship of his life, and by story's end, he has become as much of a victim of crime as the thugs he leaves dead in his wake. Now, when it came down to filming, Among the final revisions of the script was a change in location. The original script set the action in San Francisco, but the revision moved the setting to Los Angeles. Director Michael Winner said the film was the same but different from the original. That's what sequels are. Rocky 2, Rocky 3. You don't see Sylvester Stallone move to the Congo and become a nurse. Here's a look at LA and what is different, besides rape doesn't date. Principal photography began on May 4th, 1981 in downtown LA and concluded on July 1st, 1981 in San Pedro. Filming often lasted 12 hours a day in order to complete it before a Screen Actors Guild strike. The film was shot on location and depicted the natural sleazy areas of the city. 20 off-duty men of the LAPD were hired to protect the film and cast crew from potential trouble. A scene involved in an abandoned and crumbling Hollywood hotel was shot in an abandoned hotel months before it was demolished. Several film extras were locals hired to play a bit part or happened to be passing by during a shooting. Among them were drug addicts and bikers. All were included by the director in an attempt to get an authentic feel of the streets of Los Angeles. Winter tried to keep the mood on the set lighthearted. Just because the film is terrifying, that doesn't mean the people making it have to be grim, he said. All of the filming happened in Los Angeles, California. Places like San Pedro, Ladera Heights, and Hollywood were included. Here is the plot of the movie. It's roughly 8 years since the events of the first film. Paul Kersey has managed to recover from his shattered life and moved on, and is now living in Los Angeles and working as a freelance architect. One of his clients is a close friend who owns a radio station for whom he is designing a new building, and he is dating one of its reporters, Jerry Nichols, played by Charles Bronson's real-life wife, Jill Ireland. They go to pick up Paul's daughter, Carol, from the mental hospital. They spend the afternoon at a fairground where Paul's wallet was stolen by a gang consisting of Nirvana, Punk Cut, Stomper, Cutter, and Jiver. The gang splits up when Paul chases them. He pursues Jiver, whom he corners in an alley. When Jiver says that he doesn't have the wallet, Paul lets him go. The gang finds Paul's home address in his wallet and breaks into his house. They restrain Rosario, Paul's housekeeper, and begin taking turns raping her. When Paul arrives home with his daughter, he is beaten unconscious. Rosario tries to call the police, but Nirvana kills her with his crowbar. They kidnap Carol and take her to their hideout where a gang member rapes her. Carol attempts to escape by running through a plate glass window, falls into an iron fence, and dies. Paul later refuses to help the police identify the muggers. After Carol's funeral, he takes his handgun to a low-rent inner-city hotel as a base of operations. The next evening, he follows Stomper into an abandoned building as a drug deal is about to be made. Paul shoots a dealer and orders the others out before killing Stomper. The following night, he hears screams from a couple being assaulted in a parking garage by 4 muggers, which includes Jiver. Paul kills the 2 rapists and wounds Jiver. Paul then follows Jiver's blood trail into an abandoned warehouse and kills him. The LAPD suspect that the murders are work of a vigilante and asks the NYPD for guidance. This is where Detective Frank Ochoa appears. By the way, Frank Ochoa, the detective for the New York Police Department, was originally in Death Wish. His character was played by Vincent Gardenia. Ochoa expects that it may be Paul Kersey again, and is sent to assist with the case. Ochoa understands that Paul, when caught, will reveal that he was released without being charged for the killing of 10 muggers in New York City. Ochoa enters Jerry's apartment and tells her about Paul's previous vigilante killing spree in New York. After Paul returns to his house, Jerry confronts him, but he denies everything. He lied! He lied! Ochoa follows Paul, who is tailing 3 remaining gang members. He follows them to an abandoned park where an arms and drug deal is underway. A sniper scouts Paul and attempts to kill him. Ochoa warns Paul and fatally shoots the sniper. Ochoa is mortally wounded by Nirvana, and Paul wounds Punkut and kills Cutter and another dealer. The arms dealer tries to get away, but Paul shoots and causes his car to drive off a cliff and explode. Nirvana escapes. Ochoa tells Paul to avenge him, and he dies. Paul escapes, and Punkut dies from his injuries after giving information to Nirvana to the police. Paul soon learns that from one of Jerry's colleagues that the police are preparing a tactical unit to capture Nirvana. He obtains a police scanner and, by monitoring the police radio traffic, finds out when and where the arrest is going to take place. He drives to the location to kill Nirvana, who was under the influence of PCP, slashes his arm, and stabs officers while trying to escape. Tried and found criminally insane, he is sent to a mental institution. Jerry is writing a story about the case and capital punishment and takes Paul to the hospital to meet the doctor treating Nirvana. While there, Paul steals another doctor's coat and identification card and uses it to enter the asylum to confront Nirvana. After repeatedly stabbing Paul with a shiv, Nirvana ends up plunging his arm into a high voltage panel, which Paul turns on and fatally electrocuting him. Donald K., an orderly, recognizes Paul from the newspaper coverage of Carol's murder and gives him 3 minutes to escape before he rings the bell. Jerry goes to Paul's house and finds out that he made a fake doctor's ID. Upon hearing a news report of Nirvana's death on the radio, she realizes that Paul really is the vigilante that Ochoa claimed him to be. She takes off her engagement ring and leaves Paul, who arrives home moments later. Months later, after the whole ordeal took place, Paul attends a presentation of his building design for the radio station. The owner invites him to a launch party, but questions why Paul always seems to be unavailable in the evenings and never takes any phone calls. When Paul accepts the invitation, he answers, "What else will I be doing?" He then returns to the streets at night to continue his killing spree. End the movie. Death Wish 2 was released on American theaters on February 19th, 1982. It was released in the UK 8 days earlier through the distribution of Filmways Pictures in North America and Columbia Pictures International. With an $8 million budget, it did like $29 million domestically. It filmed $29 million in the United States theaters, a rare box office hit for the ailing Filmways Film Corporation. The company still ended in 1982 with losses of over $52.7 million. It was subsequently purchased by Orion Pictures. Another account said it made $10 million in rentals. It made $2 million profit for Canon Films and made an extra $29 million worldwide. It has since earned further money at home and abroad through a release for the home video market. A poll for HBO noted Death Wish 2 was in higher demand by paying viewers than Chariots of Fire, which was released in 1981. My overall rating for this movie is an 85 out of 100. I like this film better than the first film. And in all honesty, I liked it better when Paul Kersey was just killing all the gang members and avenging his daughter's death, while one of them got away in the first film, when he didn't get a chance to avenge the death of his wife in the first film. So that concludes this week's Joe Lum's movie review. Episode of Joe Lum's movie review every Friday here on this channel.
Don't